Okay, so let's take it up again. Again, I'm a substitute today for somebody who we had a little cancellation. So suddenly last week I threw myself under the bus by myself, put myself in the slot. So past years I've talked about how to raise multilingual children, and for the first time, I think even on various other conferences where I've given talks, I think it's the first time that I'm talking about me. Okay, my background, where I grew up, what kind of system I was put in that got me to this day as who I am. Okay, obviously I had to scramble to get this together, but thank you Google Photos. I was able to pick out a lot of photos from my past, and going through all those, it was fun, but kind of scrambled together. So who am I? First of all, perhaps some of you don't know who I am. I'm not Richard Simcott speaking 40 languages, or I think more the common faces that we see in the polyglot community. Really, the past 2 years through Langfest, I think I was able to integrate into the community a lot more, but not really known as a big polyglot or language expert. But I do 5 fluent, not too shabby, I think. I can do 5 others that I'll discuss later in my talk that I got to a little conversant level. And I organized this festival since 2016. But my day job, my real job, I guess, I'm a project manager in the healthcare industry. And I actually manage a team in Japan. So I live here in Canada, but I manage a team in Japan. So that's why I say it's my day job, but I do at night. Because everybody's, my meetings and everything is pretty much at night after my kids go to bed. Speaking of kids, I am the father of 3 multilingual children. My wife will be talking a little bit about them tomorrow, at a talk tomorrow. So today, it's all about me. All right. So my talk will be split into 4 sections. Chronologically, it's the most logical, easy way, I guess, for me to organize this talk. First, from birth to age 13, I lived in Asia, specifically Taiwan. From 13 to 29, I lived here in Quebec. Then I went back to Asia from 29 to 41, and age 41 to now, I'm back here again. So, yeah, I know, I look like I just came out of high school, but yeah, I'm almost half a century old now. So, here we go. The first section, this is me, little old me. My mom, she looks nothing like this today, but I think she was pretty in those days, yeah? So I was born actually in Hong Kong, 1974. And being a first son of a first son, if you know anything about Asian culture, you know that I've got a lot of pressure on my on my shoulders, okay? So my mom, she had a little book. I guess the big scheme for my life already. She was very excited to have the first son in the family. If you can read some of this, this is Japanese. It says yorokobi, happiness, birth of my Maozi, that's my name in Chinese. And here I am, and I think at this time, in the 70s, already my parents were already thinking about how to raise a multilingual child, a global citizen. And I'll walk through some of the strategies that you'll see. So this is quite, I think, avant-garde in those days. I mean, today we talk about globalization, we talk about all the technologies and communication, but to do this in those days was something that was quite avant-garde. This is my father. Yes, this is where I get my good looks. All right, he was a poor actor / stuntman / tour guide in Hong Kong. So he's a Taiwanese, but he went to Hong Kong to try his luck in the film industry. Try his luck, but not too hard. But the best luck I think he got is as a tour guide, he was able to meet my mother, who was working in the airline industries at that time, and so he was able to charm her out. But I kind of see this as a scam because a few years later, this is what he became. Oh well, he got her girl, and well, the genetics don't lie. I also turned into a little bit of a chubby kid in a few months. But I was born in Hong Kong, but I spent most of my childhood in Taiwan. And this is my father's, the family on my father's side. My grandpa, my grandma, my father, mother, and then his little brother, his wife, and cousin, etc. So I'm here. Okay, so growing up in Taiwan in the 70s, this is the kind of stuff that I was doing. And the official language in Taiwan is Mandarin. Okay, but some of you may know in Taiwan there is also a dialect. I guess is that what you call? That's called Taiwanese. About 70 to 75% of the people in Taiwan understand this language. And also, from my father's side, the family lived in Hsinchu, which is about 80 kilometers from Taipei. And in that area, they speak what is called Hakka. Okay, it's also one of the major dialects in Taiwan. So I was exposed to these three languages growing up until I was about 5 or 6, just through my family and friends in Taiwan. At the same time, I was speaking Japanese with my mother all the time. And in those days, she wanted to strengthen my Japanese, so she sent me to Japan every summer to stay with my uncle. So my uncle is my mother's big brother. So I would spend all my summers in Japan. And that's where I'd strengthen my Japanese, being immersed in Japanese for about 2 to 3 months every year. So that's a big strategy that my mom had, and it's just to put me in the multilingual environment. And I put these little toys here as another active strategy that my mother employed, and that is to buy these are remote control cars, which I have to this day, because I built these myself. Okay, these come in a box, and all the pieces are, it's a model. You have to build it up, and then you put in the motor, you sort of upgrade the suspension and whatnot. And I would get these with all the instruction manuals in Japanese, of course. So I would get these toys. It's not just to play, but I have to build these things. I have to follow the instructions. I have to read Japanese. And she gave me this. I've got all the motivation in the world, and I learned to read Japanese through this kind of activity, through watching TV, through reading the newspaper to find out what's on TV. So being in Japan every year was a big strategy for my mother to strengthen my Japanese while I was living in Taiwan. Another strategy, she put me into an American school. So from kindergarten, I was in this American school in Taipei. Here I am, and I've got about, these were small classes, or about this, I counted, there's 18 kids, including myself, and our teacher, Miss Coward, I still remember her. So my friends in this school, just as an aside, actually, I counted, there's only 1, 2, 3, I think 3 or 4 kids that I'm not connected with on Facebook, so God bless Facebook. I think thanks to Facebook, I was able to find all my friends from way back, when I was living in Taiwan, and all these guys are everywhere. They're all over the world right now. And yeah, so living in Taiwan, speaking Japanese with my mother, going to Japan every summer, and going to an American school, so I get educated in English. So at that time, she was already preparing me for the global stage. So this is a few years, 7 years. You go through kindergarten, elementary school, and I reached the age of 13. This is my last birthday that I spent in Taiwan as a kid. Age 13, this is the end of section 1. So, little summary, I have Mandarin, Japanese, Taiwanese, Hakka, and English. And English was introduced when I was 6. So, by the time I was 6, I had 5 languages introduced. And I had to use this on a daily basis without really thinking about it, without studying grammar or going through drills. This is just my daily life. Okay? Next part, so Quebec. Age 13, so I think I was about grade 3 or grade 4. My parents told me, you're going to Quebec. Now, I didn't know anything about Quebec. I hardly knew where Quebec was. But they told me that my aunt, so my father's youngest sister, married a Quebecer, and they live in Quebec, and it's a good opportunity for me to come here and study here and live a global life. And to me, well, I'm going with family, so sure, why not? So from age 13, so at age 13, I came to Quebec. I was put into Collège Bourget de Rigaud. This is in a little town called Rigaud. Some of you may be able to sing that song. There's actually a song for this little town. And age 13, Canada was paradise to me. I came in the summer. We had a pool at home. In Taiwan, if you have this, you're mighty rich. Okay, so this was a lot of fun. And the winter sports, I loved winter sports. It was just heaven sent. I don't have any pictures of myself skiing. Unfortunately, there was no 360 cameras in those days, and so I don't have any pictures of myself skiing. But I do have this picture where I'm playing hockey with my best buddy Gagwal, and I loved this so much. I started picking journals and getting photos and drawing and everything. So being in Quebec was really a lot of fun, despite the fact that I had to learn a new language. People thought, oh, it must have been hard. You come here, you don't know any French. I don't know. Didn't really feel that hard. Sure, I had to study. Sure, I went into class not knowing anything. I still remember the first day I was in class and the teacher asked me, comment tu t'appelles? I'm like, oui. Quel âge as-tu? No. Those were the 2 only words I knew. But I survived, and I graduated from this high school after 5 years without any delay. So I made it. And today I speak French fluently, thanks to this experience. Then I started studying at Ottawa University. And my best friend, Grégoire, who was playing hockey with me, he did a little exchange program with AFS in South America. I thought, I'm going to go visit you in South America. Ecuador. Like, okay, what do you speak in Ecuador? So searched that out and realized, okay, they speak Spanish. I might as well learn Spanish. It was really, in my mind, it was really easy. I'm just going to learn it up. I'm going to buy some cassettes, in those days, okay, about Barons. And I put that in the car. Day in, day out, I was listening to that, and it came with little grammar guide. I read that cover to cover. I don't really realize it, but at that time, I was so motivated to learn, and I just did it. I was even taking notes in Spanish during class. So I'm doing this chemistry class, writing whatever I could in Spanish, and fill in the holes where I had to use English, well, if I didn't know the words. And that got me using Spanish, and suddenly I was speaking Spanish. But the first exposure to Spanish was really when I went to visit Gagwal. This was a two week thing. I went there, I could sort of understand, I couldn't talk, But when I came back, I studied and I made friends. And throughout, and this would pretty much be the story of my university years all the way to the end of my graduate studies, it was just a blur of a lot of partying, a lot of traveling, a lot of trying to learn languages. Spanish was really quick for me, and at that time I thought, okay, I'm a genius. I'm going to be able to learn all these languages very easily. And so I tried to do German, I tried to do Italian, I tried to do Portuguese, but it turns out that it was a lot harder than I thought. I did get my A in German, but today I can't speak German. I got my A in Italian, but I can't hold a conversation. So that's when I realized, it's a lot harder than you think if you really want to go deep. And so I decided to narrow it down and just focus on the few languages that I have, the 5: English, French, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish, and not go out all over the place. But these languages did serve me well on my trips. I went around Europe. I went around, a little bit into Africa. This is Morocco. I went to, so you have Venice. You have Spain. I traveled a lot in those days. I went to South America again. This is Peru. And Brazil, and I loved it. And being able to speak a few languages really allowed me to enjoy all these places and pick up new languages to a certain degree pretty well, like Brazilian Portuguese. In a little conversation, not too bad. And yes, also at that time, because I spoke fluent Japanese, living in Quebec, once in a while I would get these calls to do a translation for like Berlitz or these travel agencies, and they'd have these engineers fly over from Japan, and you just can't find a lot of these Japanese French, because I was in Quebec City, Japanese French interpreters, that kind of stuff. So that I don't get a lot of jobs like that, but thanks to the languages, I did get a few, and that allowed me to, I guess, make ends meet as a student. And I also did a lot of volunteer work and conferences where they've got people from Brazil, from Italy. Just jump in. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of experience. And throughout all this, I actually studied. I did a degree in cellular molecular biology, so nothing to do with languages. But I think thanks to the fact that I had languages, I was able to devote time to something not language related. And this was my doctoral thesis, and I just pulled this out yesterday with a lot of dust on it. And I didn't remember what my thesis title was, but if anybody of you care, it's a rôle de la polyadipéribose polymérase 1 comme coordinateur de la transcription dans le contexte de la réponse cellulaire au dommage à l'ADN et la mort cellulaire. Here, I'll say it in English, but perhaps you'll understand better. The role of the poly-ADP. No. So that I did that, and that was the end of the second part. So being in Quebec from age 13 to 29, lots of things. I've picked up languages through my interest, also through some studying. And again, here's another summary of the languages that I touched on. So I've Mandarin, Japanese, Taiwanese, Hakka, and English were the ones in the first phase of my life. Then I added French by coming to Quebec, and I studied Spanish on my own, and I did German, Italian at the university, and I did a little bit of Portuguese while traveling. And I think the 5 in red are the ones that today I consider myself fluent in. And that's it for learning languages, for adding languages. And at this point in life, so I did my thesis, I did my doctoral degree, not really knowing how I was going to use it. I thought to myself, I have these languages, I must do something with it. So I know Japanese, and I know Asia was booming. I figured I should go back to my roots, go make some networking in Asia, try to set up something, and then come back. That was sort of a rough plan that I had in those days. So I decided I'm going to go back to Asia. And at that time, so scientifically speaking, Japan was still the hub, I guess, for anything science. So I went to a lab at the Tokyo Institute of Technology. I don't think any of you have seen this photo. You have all seen me as a speaker, but this is actually what I was doing in those days. And if you care, this is called a polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis. Doesn't serve me well today, but I ran a lot of those in those days. Pipetting, just doing little experiments. So this is a little tube, and you mix stuff and make reactions. So actually, you had DNA in there, and I was breaking DNA and repairing them. Isn't that cool? So doing all this made me really think. Okay, as exciting as this sounds, this is not going to allow me to use my languages. I just couldn't find a way as a scientist to learn how to use my languages. And I wanted to use my languages and culture. I thought that those were really my big skills. So that's when I thought to myself, I got to go into a company and do work in the private industry. But from a laboratory environment going into a company was really hard. It's a big jump. I was kind of scared. I didn't know how to go about it. And I thought, okay, why don't I do an MBA? Perhaps it'll teach me what the corporate world is. Perhaps it'll teach me about how a real company works. And it'll definitely give me another title that perhaps could impress a few hiring agents. So this is what I did. So while I was in the lab running experiments, and while everything was in incubation, I would study statistics or all these behavioral, organizational behavior, and all these MBA stuff that I was doing in those days while I was studying while I was running experiments and writing papers for my research. And then, so this was 2 years, and I actually found an MBA program in Japan. So I guess I missed that part. So this is the MBA program from McGill, but in Japan. So I was able to stay in Japan and still do my research and get myself an MBA. Okay, so my thought process at this time is, okay, I'm going to go into a company. What am I going to do? Everybody's going, wow, you speak English. You should go to a foreign company. But that's not how I thought. I told them, I'm a foreigner who speaks good Japanese. I'm not a Japanese who speaks good English. So why go to a foreign company and compete with Japanese people to work within the Japanese market? I thought I should go into a Japanese company, a traditional Japanese company, and a company that's going to go outside of Japan. No, a company that wants to export or develop foreign markets. So I could go in there, use my Japanese, lead the Japanese team members to go outside, because on average, a Japanese worker does not have a very good level of English. So I have that advantage by going into a Japanese company. So that was how I was thinking, and I had that advantage, a distinct advantage as a foreigner who spoke very fluent Japanese. So that's what I did. And I got in. This company is called Eisai. It was at that time the fourth largest Japanese pharmaceutical company. And I did very well. I think I had a lot of fun, and I had a lot of responsibilities. And it was exactly as I had predicted. They wanted me to go to China, to US, to Europe, to do all of the business development and everything that had to do with research, our project pipelines, our evaluations, and all that. So I stayed with this company for about 4 years, and it was a lot of fun. And my strategy was to go into a Japanese company and lead Japanese folks outside with my English. Little did I know, I guess I had another agenda. This is the first day at Eisai, and this is when I met my wife. Her name is Yuko. So I guess destiny has a fun way of expressing itself. So I met her. This was April 2008, and a few years later we got married. So this is one thing. Because I spoke fluent Japanese, I was able to pick up a Japanese wife. Okay, so another distinct advantage. We had three marriages, I guess. Well, the first one is the legal one, where you sign the contract of the the marriage contract. This is at the town of Wako, where I lived. We had a wedding in Taiwan, so this is all my family in Taiwan. And then she's from Nagasaki, so we had another wedding in Nagasaki. So this is so languages and culture have shaped my life in this way. This was November 19th, 2011. So I was 37. I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting old. I should get married. Except I had been thinking about that a long time ago, but I kept, the pressure was mounting, and I was 37. I finally got married. Now I want kids. I love kids, so I said I want kids right away. And I was thinking to myself, I'm 37. Maybe I'll be 40, 42. I don't know when I have my first kid. Little did I know. Again. So November 19th in the a.m. we went to sign the contract. And in the afternoon, my wife, she said, well, I'm feeling a little weird. Wow, maybe. We tested out. And the same day that we got married, we found out she was pregnant with our first son. So we did not have a very long honeymoon. Did not have a very long period of time, just the two of us. But it's not a problem at all. So look, literally, I sent an email to my mother. Okay, it was November 19th a.m., which is November 18th here. She was here in Canada. 2 emails later, I sent her an email that says, possibly? And I sent her this without a lot of explanation. I did not know. At this point, I did not know. And it was a 2-for-1 that day. It was a very happy day in our family. So now the next problem. We're married, and everything's hunky-dory. She's pregnant, but I'm working for Eisai in Tokyo, a very Japanese company. Now this is backfiring on me now. Okay, it's a Japanese traditional company, and Yuko was living in Nagasaki. She just got into university, she got into a medical school. So after Eisai, she left Eisai and she actually went back to school. And so she's in Nagasaki, and I would visit every weekend or every other weekend. It's if you don't know the geography, it's actually a 2-hour flight from Tokyo. So I was doing that every week, every other week. And it was tough. And then we find out she's pregnant. I'm thinking, I want to be with my kids. What am I going to do? And I asked my boss, I said, can I work from home in Nagasaki? He says, are you kidding me? He says, we don't do that. So this is what I'm saying, a very traditional Japanese company, it's hard to convince the HR to be flexible, I think, with the working conditions. But happily, I had a friend who was working for a company called Covance. It's a little different as an industry. It's not purely pharmaceutical, but more about running clinical studies. So a friend of mine who works there, he said, hey, come on over. We're looking for a project manager, and you can work from home. Problem solved. I had always wanted to work remotely. I always wanted to be location-free, work with a computer and a phone. And I always thought the only way to do that is to become a consultant, have my own company, take all the risk, and work like a slave, is what I thought. And then my friend comes up with this offer, and I thought, well, I jumped on it right away. I didn't know really what was waiting for me, but it was pure hell. But it's okay. But it's okay. It was all worth it. I'll do it again today. You know, the days where I had slept 3 hours a night for about 8 months, no problem. I'll do it again because it was all worth it. This type of working style, at that time I had, my kid was just born, and being able to see him was a lot of fun. And I'm still with Covance today, and I still work from home, except I'm a lot further than before to my teammates. I still manage the same group, but from Canada. So this kind of working condition is a lot of fun. And I always thought this was reserved for the IT industry or for bloggers, but we could actually find this in the healthcare industry. I really didn't know. And so I got our second kid. Well, my first kid. But in our family, I guess it is raising multilingual children round 2. So I'm trying to think about how to apply all the learnings that my parents taught me in raising myself, and how I could implement that for my children, which is usually the topic of what I talk about in other sessions and in other conferences. So one of the first strategies I thought of, we were living in Japan, I decided I would be speaking Mandarin with my kids all the time. My wife, being Japanese, would speak Japanese with the kids all the time, and we'll find a way to input other languages. And the first one we thought of is, I'll bring my kids to Taiwan to add, to reinforce the Mandarin. And so that's what we did. My kid is not quite 2. We went to Taiwan, and I did pretty much the same thing as what my parents did, in that I put him in an American school. So he's almost 2, so we've introduced English while living in Taiwan, so he's got Mandarin. And he would speak with mom when mom visits. Mom was still studying, so she would do the back and forth from Nagasaki to Taiwan. And that's how my kids started their multilingual adventure. And so that's it. So for me, for myself, the language learning part is pretty much over, and the different advantages that I've had over my life with the different languages, I've applied them, and now I'm spending all my energy into raising my own kids to be able to have this advantage, to be able to benefit from what languages and culture reserve for them. So we were living in Taiwan. I'm thinking next thing we should do is, now they're growing up, living in Asia is not, for me, it wasn't an ideal conditions for raising children. It's very crowded, there's a lot of people all the time, the traffic, and also the mentality to a certain degree, the education system of putting kids through, a very, very, very strict system of lots of studying and all that. So I wasn't, too agreeable on that kind of system. So I said we should bring them back to Canada. And we live out here. This is actually about an hour away from here. It's a resort town. It's a lot of nature. There's a ski hill. There's golf courses. I thought that would be a better place for my children to grow up. So we moved the whole family back to Canada in 2015. And by the same token, so they've added at that time French automatically by coming here, going to a French daycare. And this is the final strategy that I have for my kids to create this multilingual environment. Again, similar to how I grew up, but in a different twist. I thought Spanish is going to be an important language as we live in North America or even globally. Moving forward, I think it will become more and more important. So I thought I'm going to try to introduce that somehow. And the way I found out was to have au pairs. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but au pairs are basically live-in nannies. They're young, usually girls, who come for a few months, live with you, and take care of your kids, help with some housework. And so right now, we're in our third generation of au pairs. She's the first one, okay, Angelica from Mexico. So she was the one who really introduced Spanish to my kids. And then Andrea was the second one, so about a year after Angelica. And then we also wanted to reinforce English. I mean, ironically, even in Canada, living in Quebec, we thought we would like to have more English in the house. So we had a girl from Denmark help out, and she spoke English with the kids all the time. And we're at our third generation right now. So this is Ruben, and this is Adriana. They're both Mexicans. They're actually a couple. But, so Adriana speaks Spanish with the kids all the time, but our kids don't know that Ruben is actually also Hispanic, but Ruben takes care of English. So Ruben always speaks English with the kids, Adriana in Spanish, me and my father in Mandarin, my wife and my mother in Japanese, and we have a big potpourri in the house. Okay. And finally, for the past 2 years, we've established a life routine where we spend 8 months in Canada, starting pretty much now. So August to April, we live in Canada. They go to a Canadian education system or Quebec education system with the au pairs and whatnot. And then to strengthen their Mandarin and Japanese, we would spend 2 months in Japan, 2 months in Taiwan. So we just came back from Taiwan, actually, last week. So we do this cycle, and we plan to do this cycle for a few more years to really get the languages down for our kids. And that's it. That's how I used. So that's how I benefited from my parents' grand scheme of raising me into a multilingual. How I used my languages in my studies, in my career, in my love life, and now raising my own kids in multiple languages. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Well, thank you for sharing this experience for us, and it's kind of role model for your mother for me, because my daughter here, she also speaks Mandarin, English, French, and she goes to German school, in Saturday school, so explore some German. I like to know, according to experience, especially at the kid's age, for like she's 8 years old, your son is 6, right?
Yes.
6 years old. So,
yes.
Somebody's
done their homework.
I see the dates there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'd like to know for their age, I found out for my daughter, her vocabulary is limited under the level for kids only mother tongue is Mandarin or only mother tongue is English or French. So
yep.
according to your experience, how will you dealing with it, and how do you think it will help to your kids to dealing with it for like the vocabulary limitation, because they spend the time to learn language, but dealing with different ones instead of one. Yeah.
I won't deny that there's a possibility if you learn one language, you can go very deep, and if you learn 5 languages, you won't go quite as deep. That said, you've all learned languages. You know you learn very quickly at the beginning, and somewhere along the way you plateau, right? So I think for my kids, learning 5 languages, yeah, some will be better, some will not be as good. But I'm sure with time, it'll come up to a relatively good level. That said, perhaps it'll never be as good in one of the languages. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer one very good language, 99%, or 5 languages, 85%? I don't know. It's a personal choice. I prefer the latter. I don't think it's a matter of 100% and 5 languages at 20%. I don't think so. I think the 5 languages added together will be more than the total of the 1 language. That's sort of the trade-off, I think. But I don't think it's it's that simple. I think you could do 5 to a fairly good level and have maybe 1 educated language that is completely native. if not 2. I don't know. I've worked as a professional in Japan using my Japanese, which I've never studied. I've never studied Japanese, like going to school, but I can read, I can type, and I can write, do the emails. I've written articles in Japanese. You can do it.
And how do you think of the importance of written in Mandarin or Japanese? Because they're not easy as
My wife thinks it's very important. I don't as much. It would be nice to have, but I don't write. I can't. You give me a pen, I can't write, other than my name or my address. But I can read, I can type. Many Chinese and Japanese today are losing their ability to write relatively complicated characters. But I've lived in Japan for 11 years. The only times I need to write an address is when I send something from, to someone. That's when you go to the convenience store, and you have to fill out a form. Other than that, you just don't have an opportunity to really write with your hands. I don't write letters with my hands anymore. So I don't think it's that important. I did try to learn, but I learned it and then I forget. I just can't retain it. It took everything for me to retain my kids' names. All right. Thank you.
How do you deal with the problem of kids at the age of your kids? As I had 3 kids and I brought them up in 3 languages, but the problem they had, many times they would learn a word at school in English and then come home and speaking German, but had never learned that word in English or in Spanish. And they got terribly frustrated at one point that they were learning words in one language and didn't know them in the other. How do you deal with that?
So were they... Oh, okay, let me back up. One thing that I did not mention, since it's a presentation about me, not about how I raise my kids, but a key word that I always use in my presentations about raising kids is OPO. It's one person, one language. That's why I stress the fact that I always speak Mandarin with my kids. I never switch around. Never. So they develop a habit of speaking Mandarin with me, a habit of speaking Japanese with my wife, a habit of speaking French at school. And that's it. That's a habit. And yes, they'll have certain vocabulary that they use at school that they won't know if they turn to Adriana in Spanish. And they just ask. So to come back to your question, I wonder, were you learning or getting them to learn German as a extra thing, or were you always speaking German with them, like uniquely?
My wife and I spoke German at home.
Okay.
They went to the international school and had kids in the street they spoke Spanish with and played with.
Okay.
So they lived in these 3 different worlds.
Yep.
And were having vocabulary which was not necessarily known in one of the other languages.
Yep.
And it caused great frustration. They got really pissed off.
Really? Maybe my kids will have that frustration later in life. I mean, myself growing up, I can't recall being frustrated because of that. I see my kids, speaking Spanish with the au pair on, certain games and whatnot, and they turn around, talk to me in Mandarin, and not be able to say that specific thing in Uno or whatever game that they're playing. And then I'll teach them. But from that to being a frustration, I don't see it yet. I don't see it yet. And I've not experienced it myself, so...
Allô, je peux poser une question en français?
Ben oui.
OK, je voulais juste savoir, je sais que ta présentation c'était sur toi, mais par rapport à tes enfants...
Il n'y a pas de question sur moi.
Mais tout ce qui se passe à la fin de l'année scolaire,
oui.
Comment ça marche pour tes enfants? Ou vous faites
Bonne
comment?
question.
Puisque vous êtes partis 4 mois, non?
Oui.
Puis l'école
Bonne question.
Ici, c'est 10 mois.
On parle avec l'école, ils nous disent, quand vous revenez du Japon, de Taïwan, au mois d'août, faites un examen pour l'enfant. S'il passe, il monte. Oui. But homeschooling exists, right? It's the same thing. except we don't do it for the whole year. Pourquoi pas pour 2 mois, 3 mois? S'il passe l'examen, c'est ce qui compte. Mais il risque de ne pas le passer. Ça se peut. Ça, c'est notre responsabilité, mais on va assumer. Come on, Bone.
It's not directly associated with the content per se, but I was wondering who made the drawings for your books?
Illustration. Éric Bellil.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's actually Éric Bellil qui vit au Japon. I met him in Japan when I was writing my book. So he's a Quebecer. Lived in Japan, has a Japanese wife. He's a very good artist.
All right, merci. Thank
Merci
you.
beaucoup. Thank you very much.